Allow me to introduce myself. I am Julie. I am 47 years of age. I have spent 23 years in the bonds of marriage. I am blessed with a husband who adores me, a home that has always been whole, and 2 teenage children who still seek solace in the name Mom. According to every indication, I ought to feel satisfied. Yet, contentment does not equate to the essence of being alive. The journey began with a message on Facebook. A benign presence. Hello, Jules. Quarter-century reunion. Are you heading out? The name caught in my throat. Ethan. The young man I once envisioned as my future husband. The young lad I abandoned when I opted for stability instead of turmoil. The boy I cherished before I understood the havoc love could wreak. For 5 long minutes I found myself fixated on the screen, contemplating my response. Only 3 words. I'll be there. The gathering took place at a quaint vineyard on the outskirts of town. Warm vintage lights cast a soft glow, while smooth jazz renditions of 90s hits fill the air, accompanied by the distant sound of laughter. I donned a delicate black dress that whispered elegance. Unappealing. Not dowdy. A state of liminality. Something secure. It was only when I laid eyes on him. Ethan remained largely the same as I had anticipated. His smile lingered, a captivating force that rendered breath itself a challenge. Yet, fresh creases had begun to form around his eyes. There was a stillness in his movements, a subtlety that only those who have known hardship possess within them. He approached me directly, a whiskey clutched in his hand. Julie Taylor, he remarked, a shake of his head accompanying his words. You remain the same. Liar, I murmured, yet a smile danced on my lips regardless, for there were still fragments of my being that ignited in his company. Despite the passage of time, we conversed until dawn broke, concerning all matters, and absolutely nothing. Our partners, our children, the individuals we once were. He confided in me that he had recently completed his divorce. He wasn't angry, merely weary. He never truly moved past the way we concluded things. I found myself at a loss for words in response to that. As I took a sip of my wine, a warmth began to bloom beneath my skin. As the clock struck midnight, the gathering started to dwindle. Individuals embraced, pressed their lips to cheeks, and exchanged vows they would ultimately forget. Then Ethan turned to me gently. Would you like to take a stroll? Only for a moment. I inclined my head in agreement. For the truth was that to refuse would have been disingenuous. Silence enveloped the vineyard. The heavens stretched like a deep, rich fabric, adorned with twinkling gems of light. We strolled quietly, our shoulders grazing occasionally. It was innocuous. It was merely inconsequential. Until it ceased to be. He came to a halt, directed their gaze towards me. I believe that encountering you once more would ease the process of moving on, he remarked. However, it seems to be having the contrary effect. My gaze was fixed upon him. To the boy I once cherished. The man lingered in my memory, not vividly but in essence. You're married, he interjected hastily. I understand. I'm simply not seeking anything intricate. I'm not requesting it for tomorrow. His voice trembled. Allow me to request just one night. Only this evening. There are no guarantees. Authenticity reigns. Simply, what we once were. For the final time. My breath hitched. Every fiber of my being urged me to flee, to act with integrity, to return to my vehicle, to my lodging, to the existence that awaited me. Yet a more resounding voice murmured, what if this night is the sole moment you will ever experience such a vivid sense of life again? I remained silent. I have just bridged the gap that lay between us. And when his lips met mine, it unfolded at a measured pace. It lacked desperation. It felt as though I was returning to a part of myself I believed I had long since laid to rest. We arrived at a quaint inn just 10 minutes away from the vineyard. No inquiries were made. Just a pair of names. 2 keys. A single chamber. The walls bore the weight of time. The linens were fresh and invigorating. The stillness crackled with intensity. He stripped away my layers as if he were lost in a reverie. I allowed him to proceed. I sought to leave a lasting impression. I longed to be recognized, not merely as a wife, not solely as a mother, but as the woman I once was when I embraced love with abandon. That evening our words were few. Our fingers met. We inhaled sharply. We lingered in the moment, creating an illusion that time was not slipping away. And in the stillness of 3 a.m., as I found myself ensnared in unfamiliar sheets, I murmured, "This is merely for tonight." He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "I understand." Yet, even as those words left my lips, though I struggled to accept it, within the depths of my being, I was already aware. One night would never suffice. The sun arrived far too early. It invariably happens at the most inconvenient times. I rose before he did. His arm lingered around my waist, radiating warmth and familiarity that struck a chord deep within me. For a fleeting instant, I allowed myself to indulge in a fantasy. I was not defined by the role of a wife. This was not an error. In that fleeting moment, time twisted itself, allowing me to relive the essence of being 21 once more. Yet, the clock on the nightstand flickered to life, displaying 6:42 a.m. Reality has a way of swiftly reasserting itself. With deliberate care, I eased myself out of bed. I collected my dress, my undergarment, my footwear. I held back my tears. Yet, deep within, I sensed a quiet fracture had occurred. As if I had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. I cast a final glance in his direction. Resting serenely, lips gently parted, forehead smooth and at ease. The man I once cherished. The man to whom I had once more surrendered myself. And I softly spoke it to the room, not for his ears but for my own. "This is the final moment." After that I departed. The journey back in the car was akin to navigating through a thick mist. The sort of mist that envelopes your skin, your musings, your very essence. The hotel room lay vacant, devoid of any presence. I noticed 5 missed calls from my husband on my phone. One text. "Is everything all right?" I gazed at the message, lost in thought for what felt like an eternity. Typed, "Affirmative. Simply weary. On my way back shortly." Then press send. A falsehood encapsulated in just 7 words. That afternoon I made my way home. Welcomed with warm embraces, children inquiring about the remaining cupcakes from the reunion, my husband feigning indifference to the relief of my return. A smile graced my lips. I took action. I prepared dinner. I was flawless. Except within. I was ablaze. That evening, I found myself restless in bed, unable to drift into slumber. Beside me, David's snores filled the air. The dog nestled at the foot of the bed. My thoughts echoed with every moment of that night. The warmth of his breath against my neck. His voice, soft and intimate, caressed my name like a secret shared between us. The manner in which I released each fragment of myself that I had concealed for an eternity. I promised myself I wouldn't make contact. I had no need to. The following morning, I found myself greeted by a message. "Go on forever." Thus, I uttered the phrase that would alter the course of everything. Indeed, entanglements do not start within the confines of hotel rooms, or collars marked by the hue of lipstick, or falsehoods. They start softly, amidst the stillness, in lingering glances that stretch beyond the moment, in caresses that extend a heartbeat longer than necessary. Following that second message, the single word I regretted sending, everything began to unravel. Gently, with great care. It was as if we were engaged in a choreography we had both mastered long ago. Ethan and I started to gather every 2 weeks. Not at my place ever. Always distant from his apartment. Perpetually caught in the delicate balance of existence. Cozy cafes nestled in the hidden corners of the city. Establishments featuring entrances that led straight to the parking area. His car rested in the dappled shade of trees that provided a delicate balance of light and shadow. It was not part of our design. There was no necessity for that. Our longing drew us together with an irresistible force. The initial encounters were chaotic, starving, hasty. As soon as the door clicked shut, our hands found each other with an urgency that felt almost desperate. As if the universe had a debt to settle, and we were intent on reclaiming every moment in a single breath. Yet, in an unexpected twist, everything shifted. He began to bring coffee. Unbeknownst to me, I began to leave my earrings on his dashboard. It ceased to be merely a matter of longing, and began to transform into something entirely different. A chilling encounter. Within the confines of my home, I transformed into two distinct individuals. Julie, the nurturing figure. Julie, the devoted wife. I prepared lunches, tackled the laundry, and kept track of birthdays. And then, another Julie existed. The individual who donned lipstick once more. The one whose eyes sparkled with joy. The individual who glanced at her phone each hour, yearning for a message that simply read, Tuesday. Same spot. Guilt washed over me in relentless waves. As night enveloped the room, I found myself beside David, my husband, the one who still cared enough to bring me tea during my headaches. I would gaze up at the ceiling, lost in thought, pondering the mysteries of our life together. What sort of woman am I evolving into? What sort of wife-mother individual can deceive so effortlessly? Yet, the memory of Ethan's hands resting on my back would resurface. His voice, deep and unwavering, summoned me with the name Jules, in a way that no one else ever could. And I would yearn for it once more. More than merely his physique. Yet, the iteration of myself that came alive solely in his presence. As I gently brushed my daughter's hair one day, she turned to me and said, Mom, I've noticed you've been smiling more these days. Has something positive occurred? I stood still, my body locked in place. Once more a smile graced my lips. Yet this time, I found myself uncertain of the nature of that smile. The struggle to remain concealed was becoming increasingly difficult. Ethan began to pose genuine inquiries. Do you still hold feelings for him? I'm not sure, I replied with sincerity. I believe I cherish the essence of who he once was, who we once were. Yet now, there are moments when I sense myself fading away in his presence. We reclined in his bed one afternoon, the sheets entwined around our feet. He gazed at me and uttered, You won't vanish when you're with me. And in that moment tears began to flow. For he was indeed correct. And that filled me with dread. David started to observe. He never uttered the term affair. Yet he inquired about matters such as, What has caused you to be so withdrawn recently? Where do you wander off to when you claim you're out for a stroll? I was not truthful. Time and time again. And I loathed myself for the effortless way the deceit flowed. Yet I pressed on. Due to my inability to do so, after spending the evening with Ethan, I returned home and stepped into the kitchen. David stood present. He gazed at me intently for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking. There's something unique about your scent. I stood still, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. Could you clarify what you mean? I inquired. I don't know, he said, his tone devoid of emotion. You seem to be drifting away these days. I feel compelled to share a secret. Right there. Instead, I pressed my lips to his cheek and murmured that I was feeling weary. As I stood under the cascading water that night, I found myself scrubbing with an intensity one had never experienced before. Yet, no deluge could cleanse the reality that lay bare. Ethan and I promised each other we would put an end to it, that we would take a moment to pause. We once uttered it aloud. The situation is becoming perilous. Yet we never ceased. For halting seemed akin to obliterating the sole fragment of our existence that resonated with authenticity. Thus we pressed on, concealed amidst the obvious, embracing the darkness of affection, feigning that we had mastery over what had long since spiraled beyond our grasp. I was aware that it was just a question of when the entire structure would come crashing down. Yet in those days, I simply yearned for one more chance. Next, yet another. Next, yet another. For the simple reason that the reality is, it was destined to be more than a single evening. And beneath the surface, it was never our true desire for it to unfold this way. I found myself coming apart at the seams, bit by bit, with each passing day. First it goes unnoticed. The coffee is still your domain. Continue to respond to the emails. Continue to prepare the lunches, greet your reflection with a smile, and neatly arrange the towels. Yet there's a shift in the air. You have stepped outside the boundaries of your own existence. You are merely executing it. David began to observe me with increased intensity, not immediately clear, calm and composed, simply conscious, and that was even more dire. For the first time I sensed that I was truly acknowledged, but not in the way Ethan perceived me. David observed the gaps, the fissures I could no longer mend. He began to inquire more frequently. What is it about Tuesdays that keeps you away? In the past, you never wore perfume to yoga. Who is it that keeps interrupting your dinner with calls? With every instance I deceived. Gentle untruths. Simple deceptions. Yet they began to resonate like whispers in a vacant chamber. And Ethan's patience was wearing thin. He refrained from stating it outright. Yet I sensed it. The way his voice hung in the air, stretching the moment as he uttered his farewell. The manner in which his messages dwindled, then intensified. One evening, following our intimate embrace in quietude, he gazed into my eyes and remarked, "Have you ever pondered parting ways with him?" I propped myself up, my heart racing wildly. "Pardon." He remained unyielding. "I truly mean it. I understand we agreed this would merely be a tiny detail. But Julie, this has grown beyond the trivial. You're aware of that." My gaze was fixed upon him. Air eluded me. I had contemplated it on multiple occasions. Yet contemplating and acting, those exist as distinct realms. "I have a family," I murmured softly. "I understand." He took a moment to stop. "I have no intention of diminishing that. Yet I refuse to continue feigning that this pain doesn't exist. For that reason it does." It was the moment when Ethan first distanced himself from me, in body and spirit. He restrained his touch, spoke with restraint, maintained a sense of detachment, and that, in some inexplicable way, stung deeper than his absence ever had. Within the confines of our home, David faced me with determination. It was not a battle. It had deteriorated further. It was silent. One evening, he strolled into the kitchen, propped himself against the counter, and inquired, "Is your heart captivated by another?" The words broke me apart. For the reason that he felt no anger. He was shattered. And I had shattered him. The truth could no longer be hidden. Not entirely. This time, no. I spoke the sole truth that existed. "I'm not certain." He refrained from raising his voice. Nothing was thrown. He merely inclined his head. Then she stepped out of the room. It was at that moment I understood. At times, the absence of sound speaks volumes, marking the most profound conclusion of all. I sent a message to Ethan that evening. I believe he is aware. He took his time before responding. Yet when he finally did, it was brief. "Perhaps the moment has come." What is the occasion? To depart? To obliterate the remnants that remained? How can we transform this situation into something tangible? The choice eluded me. I found myself utterly immobilized. Upon waking the following morning, I discovered a note resting on the kitchen table. David's penmanship. "I'm stepping away for a few days to find some clarity. I cherish you deeply. Yet, I find myself questioning whether I truly know you anymore." I found myself seated in solitude, gazing at the very table that had borne witness to 2 decades of shared breakfasts, celebrations of life, evenings dedicated to assignments, cereal in the quiet hours of the night. In that moment of clarity, I found myself divided into 2 distinct halves. This moment, both facets of my being were disintegrating. Ethan requested a meeting. We lingered in the car, stationed close to the shimmering lake. "I love you," he uttered with quiet sincerity. And for the first time I allowed myself to embrace the possibility. Yet the words remained unspoken from my lips. Not at this moment. Perhaps never. For when one shatters the essence of the sacred, a union, household, your individual identity, you can't just stroll away unscathed. It is yours to bear. As if remnants of ash linger beneath your nails. As if a wound lingers beneath the surface. I informed Ethan that I required some time to myself. Cosmos. To ponder. To select. He nodded, yet the sorrow reflected in his gaze revealed a deeper truth. He was beginning to release his grip. What could possibly be more disheartening? I found it impossible to hold him accountable. Not all conclusions are marked by the sound of doors being forcefully shut, or exclaimed phrases, or shattered plates. Some conclusions simply fade away. Silently. As the dawn breaks, a delicate veil of fog lingers in the air, as if you were holding your breath without even knowing it. David spent 4 days with his sister. He failed to make the call. No message sent. During those days, I found myself enveloped in quietude. Gliding through the rooms, I feel like a specter haunting my own existence. I prepared a meal. I tidied up. I gazed at the empty spot on the couch that once held his presence. As I stood before the hallway mirror, the moment arrived when I finally beheld my own reflection. She was almost unrecognizable to me. Ethan reached out to me on the second night. His voice carried a low, steady cadence, yet it bore the weight of fatigue. "I understand that you're facing many challenges," he said. I want you to understand that I'm present. Yet, I cannot remain in the shadows any longer, Julie." After that, words eluded us both. What more could possibly be expressed? A chaos of my own making lay before me, regarding my union, regarding my commitments, of two men who desired me in contrasting manners, and whom I had wounded in ways they did not merit. Upon David's return home, he hesitated to unpack immediately. He positioned himself opposite me at the kitchen table and remarked, "I'm not seeking specifics. I have no desire for them. But I must ask, is there anything remaining for us here?" I found myself wanting to say yes. I truly did. Yet what emerged was but a faint murmur. "I'm not sure." He inclined his head in acknowledgement, gulped with difficulty, and proclaimed, "Perhaps it's time for both of us to take a step back." Under the cover of darkness, I sent a message to Ethan. "I can no longer continue down this path. I apologize." He took an hour to respond. I had a feeling this was inevitable. It certainly doesn't simplify matters. My affection for you knows no bounds. It always will. Our words fell silent after that moment. He chose not to block me. I chose not to delete him. We simply floated away. Two individuals who once exchanged it all, now rendered mute. Time slipped away month by month. David and I have embarked on a journey into therapy. We returned to the same room once more, rested in close proximity, shared another breakfast together. Yet, an unarticulated tension lingered in the air between us. A picture removed, yet its shadow lingers on the wall. I ceased to wear the fragrance that Ethan adored. I ceased to glance at the cafes where our paths once crossed. I've ceased the habit of checking my phone at night. Yet, on certain evenings, in the stillness of the moment, and my husband lies peacefully asleep beside me, his name lingers in my mind. I can still hear his voice echoing in the recesses of my thoughts, still pondering what might have unfolded, had I agreed. Yet I chose not to. I embraced the existence I had created, the family I had lovingly cultivated, the iteration of myself that had mastered the art of survival, even if she occasionally lost touch with the essence of being truly alive. Perhaps that is the most unforgiving aspect of it all. There are moments when love alone may fall short. Not when it comes after the moment has passed. Not when it asks for an excessive toll. Not when it risks incinerating everything else in its path. The dress I wore that night still hangs in my closet. It lies concealed in the depths of the closet. Not that I have any desire to don it once more. Yet I find myself reluctant to part with it. Not at this moment. Though I uttered my farewell, his presence continues to resonate, a melody that lingers in my mind. As if emerging from a dream, I find myself awake far too early. We vowed it would be merely a single evening. Yet the reality is, I continue to dwell in its lingering presence.